Hello, I'm Bill Galvano, and welcome to Weekly Update. As we all know, nothing is more important than our safety and security. And when it comes to making sure we are safe and secure right here in Manatee County, that job falls on our Sheriff Brad Stubbe. Sheriff, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Bill.
Why don't we start out by explaining to the viewers a little bit about the Sheriff's Office. I mean, there are those aspects that are visible to us. We see the officers, the deputies on the streets, the school resource officers. We know there's a county jail. But I think a lot of people don't realize how much there really is to your department, how many employees you have, how many different entities you have control over. So if you want to give us a thumbnail sketch, that'd be great.
Well, we've got about 1,130 employees, and it's broken into four bureaus. And of course, the Enforcement Bureau is the one that everybody sees. It's the men and women in the green uniform driving the green and white cars that are out there answering the calls for service. And of course, there are a lot of other things in the Enforcement Bureau, but that's the main part of that. Then of course, the Investigative Bureau has our persons that are investigating crimes. Whatever that crime may be, they're responsible for that as well. And crimes against children is also in that area. Then we have the Administrative Bureau and civil papers, the court system, all of those things, fleet maintenance, all of those are under Admin Bureau. And then of course the last one is the Corrections Bureau. And the jail in and of itself is like a little city. And
how many inmates do we have right now?
We have about 1,025. And the main facility was built for right around 1,000, but we have an annex that can house up to 400. The problem with that is I can't put people in there because I do not have the personnel to do the proper supervision of that 400. But it's there in case we need it. But we try to keep the population around 1,000. Right now, though, we're saving and have been saving the community probably around $1.5 million to $2 million just on food costs alone and other things that we do.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. When you say you're saving, you're talking about at the jail facility.
Yes.
You're saving the taxpayers' money. How?
If we didn't grow our own crops, have our own cattle and meat processing plant, have our own grist mill, have our own tilapia fish plant, have our own hogs that we trap that are in the vegetable fields that we have, so growing our own vegetables. Had we not had all those things, then we would have to go out and actually buy those off the market. And because we do our own vegetables, grow our own vegetables, have cattle, about 750 head, and a meat processing plant, have fish, thousands of pounds a year that actually go to feed the inmates, we're saving that money. And in addition to that, we make our own mattresses, pillows, uniforms, so everything that the inmates are in or sleeping on, they make. Okay. And that's another savings.
And when you're talking about the food products, the farming, if you will, you're talking about the inmates are doing the work.
That's correct.
Okay. And this is something that is not happening everywhere in the state, am I right?
No. Well, for instance, Sarasota County, their jail is downtown. So obviously it's not located on acreage where they can do what it is that we do. Yeah, it's pretty innovative, and we save a lot of money.
How did the idea of making your own mattresses come about?
Jamie Higginbotham, who's the major up there, they all go to different seminars, and he happened to see this somewhere and said, we can do this. Because at the time, we were actually making the clothes, underwear, everything for the inmates. And he said, with buying a few different sewing machines, we can do it. And we are doing it, have been for quite some time. We actually do our own dry cleaning. All of our uniforms for all the deputies are actually dry cleaned right there. And of course, that's a cost savings to the taxpayers as well.
And that's something the taxpayers really appreciate. I mean, in this type of economy that we have, really in any economy, we should be as fiscally responsible as possible, and doing things like you've just described seems to fit that model. How much does it cost to feed an inmate then on a daily basis?
It's less than $2 a day.
Less than $2 a day for 3 meals?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great program. Let me switch gears a little bit. What is, in your opinion, you're working in this community every day, you deal with issues really at a statewide level. What is the biggest challenge right now that your department faces?
Crime and keeping crime down. And then the assets that we need to enable us to do that. And I'll give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
In 2009, we decreased crime in Manatee County by 12%. 2010, last year, we decreased it by another 4%. And now I think we're at a tipping point because we've done strategic plans. We know that, number one, we're not as well paid as we should be, and those comparisons are with surrounding agencies. And then,
like what? Like
a deputy starting here makes a little under $40,000. If you had a son or a daughter that wanted to be a deputy, and perhaps you inquired with us but then got on the internet and found that the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office makes $8,000 more to start, or the Tampa Police Department makes $10,000 more to start, as a parent, where would you send them? Because it's just, a 45-minute drive to either Hillsborough County or to Tampa PD. That's what we're competing with here. And of course, we haven't had any pay increases in the last 4 years, obviously because of the economic conditions. But the strategic plan told us that we're 50 deputies short, uniformed deputies short on the road. Okay. If we're making a decrease in crime for the last 2 years, what do you think we could have done if I had 50 more deputies to throw at particular problems, whether it be the drug problem or the gang problem? So significantly, that's what I worry about from day to day, is what are we going to be able to do with the crime? And the gangs, we started the RICO investigation about 3.5 years ago, Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organization. We have...
and that was based on the Attorney General's actions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes and no. We had just finished a RICO, but it had nothing to do with gangs. It was actually on a stolen, a group that was doing stolen refrigerators and stoves and things out of homes that were just recently completed, brand new homes. And it was called the Barfield investigation because the main players, their last name was Barfield. And because there was 4 counties involved, we had the statewide prosecutors involved in it, and we did a RICO on that organization. I think there was 30-some people that were arrested. When we finished that, we had been making gang arrests for the drive-by shootings. I mean, we were having 5 or 6 drive-by shootings a week, making the arrest. It got to the point in time when the state attorney's office was going to do depositions. Well, then we couldn't find witnesses, or the victims would recant their statements. So these folks that we had in jail then were released, and they were right back in the community shooting.
Like that. And you're talking, that's part of the problem with gang prosecution, because you have witnesses and others who might be able to provide information but are scared to.
That's correct. That's correct. And then, of course, the RICO investigation is a historical investigation where you actually choose, and I use Brown Pride Locos, that's the first one that we did. We chose 9 of the top in their organization, and you link them together by the crimes that they committed, the crimes that they were convicted of, and then you have to prove that they are a gang member, which is easy to do, because if I stop them at 2 o'clock in the morning and I ask them all kinds of questions, they'll lie to me until you get to the question of, well, what gang are you with? And they'll proudly tell you BPL, Brown Pride Locos, and they've got a tattoo on their neck or their arm to prove that. And then, of course, you have to have a predicate crime that links them all together. So Brown Pride Locos was first, SIR 13 was next. Third shift was third, and we've arrested to this point and placed in prison about 40, 45 gangbangers. Now, we've had a 4th RICO ready to go for over a year, but because we use the statewide prosecutor's office, and this is getting back to your earlier question about the Attorney General, people modeled after what we did. There was a grand jury that was impaneled on the East Coast. They called our folks over and said, how are you doing these RICO investigations with the statewide prosecutor's office? Well, it caught on. And now I can't get a statewide prosecutor because he's busy in other law enforcement agencies doing RICOs. So that in and of itself is a problem. But we're looking at that as well. I have a law enforcement trust fund, which has seized monies from the drug dealers, and I'm actually looking at paying the salary for the next 2 years of a statewide prosecutor who's currently on a grant who will be going off. And of course, the agreement will be that they work exclusively in Manatee and Sarasota counties prosecuting the gangs. So we're going toward that.
And that should help you accelerate.
Absolutely.
What level of gang activity do we have currently in Manatee County?
14 identified gangs, between 600 and 800 members and associate members. I don't think you see it now like you did 3 years ago. We still have drive-by shootings that are gang related, but not nearly as what we had in the past. And just so folks know, we actually have 2 units, 2 separate gang units that work on these RICOs. One that does the RICOs and one's actually out in the field every night, and they respond to the drive-by shootings, or they respond to surveillances where we're actually watching gang members in hopes of catching them, in a crime. So we got 2 groups out there that have been working for about 3 years now. But we've been successful, but I'll never be able to sit here and tell you or anybody else that we're done with gangs in Manatee County. That will never happen. We have to stay aggressive with them.
And can you really ever be done with it?
I don't think so. I really don't.
Well, I would agree that you've made tremendous progress, and I know as I was serving in the legislature, we were watching very carefully gang activity throughout the state. And frankly, Sheriff, what you were doing here in Manatee County, just as you pointed out, was ahead of the curve and a model for the rest of the state. And so let's hope that you could continue to keep doing that, and that the state continues to follow your lead. Right now we're in session. The legislature's in session, and there are bills that you are watching, I know, and others that you are watching because you don't want to see them come to fruition. So let's talk a little bit about legislation that's out there. First of all, one of the more controversial subjects that has been put into bill language in different forms is the idea of the immigration bill. It started out in Arizona, if you will, and there's different drafts that are being kicked back and forth in Tallahassee. Do you have an opinion as to, in general, whether this is a good or a bad idea?
Well, I actually spoke on this and wrote an article for the Sarasota paper probably about 4 months ago. And although I'm for some of the language in the bills, but unfortunately, and what people have to understand is, it is probably going to affect my population at the jail. And I'll give you an illustration. If I were to stop an individual, legal traffic stop, and ask for his driver's license, and he tells me he doesn't have one, and I can take him to jail to get him fingerprinted and photographed, a bond will be set for him. And by the time it makes it through the process of the fingerprinting, and the fingerprinting is going off to ICE, which they automatically do, and ICE takes the time to actually look at them to say whether or not, this guy is illegally in the country. Immigration Customs Enforcement, the feds that actually are responsible, really, in my opinion, for the immigrants in our country, the illegal immigrants. By the time that occurs, he could bond out and be right back on the street. And then ICE will contact us days later and say, well, Johnny Smith, that guy we have a hold on. And we say, well, we've released him, and here's the address that he gave us. So the system's in place, but the system isn't being utilized because the manpower involved with ICE cannot give you what you need in a timely manner. Now let's take it a step further. Let's just say, for instance, this time that I have identified that this person is illegally in the country, and ICE puts a hold on him. ICE doesn't come to get him from my jail for 3 weeks because they don't have a lot to come and pick up in this area, so he sits in my jail. And let's just say perhaps he's got a toothache, and then I've got to transport him to a dentist, and we have to get the care for him and then bring him back to my facility. And then consider he's in my facility for 3 weeks. I've taken him to the doctor. We, the citizens of Manatee County, the taxpayers, have to pay for that. So to me, there are some real, just fundamental issues with what everybody is trying to do here with the immigration laws. And all I would ask is, and this is what I had said before, legislators, come and talk to us instead of writing something and then wanting us to react. Come and talk to us and let us tell you what the nuances are here and how we could make this better. And now I'm all for having the legislation in place if it's going to work. I've been given information in the past that even when folks are picked up, even when there is a hold on them, they're taken from the facilities and transported to Chrome detention facility in Miami, and they're just processed down there by ICE, and they're let go right back into the community.
So it's almost it goes full circle. You know, these types of bills have come to the forefront, frankly, because citizens feel like the federal government is not fulfilling their obligation to secure our borders.
And I agree with that.
And so that's the genesis of this type of legislation. And I guess what I'm hearing you say is that we just need to make sure logistically we're accomplishing the goal, because the examples that you have shared with us are further examples of where you might take action, but then once again it falls on the feds, the federal government,
That's
to
correct.
step up to carry it through. And if they're not able to do it for whatever reason, or do it in a timely or efficient manner, then you're back at square one and you've expended resources.
And I've got an overcrowded jail. So there can be some huge implications here with that particular bill, or the bills that are out there really right now.
Okay.
Somebody said something rather interesting about that too. If in fact we were to get all the illegal aliens out of Manatee County, out of the fields, did we think that Manatee County residents were then going to be the labor to go into the fields and pick the tomatoes and the oranges? So there are huge issues here, huge issues.
Well, you brought up about legislators speaking with you, and you know, I know there was among many a period when I was working on the gaming legislation, and you were very helpful to me, giving me some insights on various matters. But one of them was, and is still part of the legislative agenda this session, was these gaming cafes, if you will, these internet gaming cafes that you see, and we still see them around the area within Manatee County and really around the state. Can you talk a little bit about that? That's those game areas where people come and there's really not a clear direction statutorily for you all? That's
exactly the point. There is nothing clear for us. I mean, we've actually gone to some of these places in the past and seized the machines. They were taking space in our warehouse. Years have gone by. It's been litigated, and there's still no resolve here. And yeah, we need something that's clear cut to say either you can do it and these are the rules, or you can't. And you know, you throw in the chance. You throw in that they can. You're not going to make money. You can't get money, but oh, by the way, you can get a gift card, or you know, there's some reward there. So yes, I personally am against any of the gambling. The Florida Sheriff's Association is against any future gambling up to what we have to this point. And we need clear legislation so that we can go out and enforce whatever law is passed. Bottom line is, folks call all the time and they say, you know, this is going on down here. What are you all going to do about it? We're kind of in a catch-22. We go down, we investigate it, and we are of the opinion that it is against the law. But then if you try to make a case, as I said, it gets tied up in litigation, and it's kind of like,
there are loopholes involved.
Energy? Yeah.
You have promotional statutes to deal with. And,
oh, yeah.
But I know from my perspective, it's something that I don't like to see in the community, and hopefully they'll be successful in establishing some clear definitions, because you know that you see them popping up all over the place, and that's another example of you expending resources and maybe not having the air support that you need from Tallahassee.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's talk about the prescription drug monitoring program.
Exactly where I was going to go next. That's a big issue on the Florida Sheriff's Association agenda. First of all, talk about the problem in general, prescription drug problem we have right here in Manatee County that you've seen.
Every day I get significance from my supervisors who respond to scenes where they believe there's a significant incident. And at least 2 or 3 times a week, I get this paperwork that says we're in a motel room or we're in a bedroom and the person is deceased. And the age is from 18 on up to 40s and 50s. There's no sign of violence, but there are prescription drug bottles around, and where there's supposed to be a certain number of pills, by the date that it was dispensed, there are not those pills. So in most cases, we're thinking that it's going to be a drug overdose. And of course, we can't make that call. It has to be a medical examiner's office case, and then they 2, 3, sometimes a month later make that call based on the toxicology reports. So I see this every single day almost, and it's a huge problem. And what I don't understand is it was funded privately for the first year, and then I believe again funded by grant for the second year. And what I've read in the press is that there's a drug company that stepped forward that actually is the OxyContin one of the manufacturers. They've pledged $1 million, and I'm thinking to myself, the governor doesn't want to take this and move us forward in this area when we have this huge problem. It used to be 7, now I was told it was 8 deaths a day in the state of Florida, and we have folks all over the country who come here to get their drugs. And
let's take a moment and describe the type person who's using this type of drugs. I mean, it's our neighbors, right?
It hits every facet of our community, and some become hooked on the drugs because they had a legitimate injury, they had a legitimate prescription, but because as potent as this is, they become addicted to it. And now it's really not that they're taking it for the injury as much as they're taking it because they feel high and feel better and life's really grand. And then you got folks that, a lot of our burglaries, home burglaries, they go right to the medicine cabinet and they're stealing whatever's in there. And then they'll go to the jewelry box next and take whatever jewelry because they can go and pawn the gold. But it's a huge problem, and I don't understand why we're in the position that we're in with this. Has already been passed by the legislature.
It passed while I was a member of the legislature. It was an important bill. It was one that I supported, and as rules chair wanted to make sure made it to the agenda. I know what influenced me, in addition to the points you just made, were the fact that teenagers were dying over these prescription drugs, that it seemed to be something that was in vogue for the young adults in our community. Is that true still?
Get it out of the mom and dad's medicine cabinet. And I'll give you a great example, and I'll use myself. I had shoulder surgery, and then after that I had wrist surgery, and I was prescribed the OxyContin. And I took maybe 1 or 2 of those pills, and it was like, I don't even want to touch this stuff again. Well, where did that sit for years? In my medicine cabinet at home. We just recently opened up a prescription drug drop box at the sheriff's office. You can come into our front desk, you can bring us your unused prescription drugs, you dump it in a plastic sandwich bag and put it in, no questions asked. We don't want ID, you don't have to tell us who you are, and we'll dispose of it. Because it is such a huge problem. But I'm very disappointed in the governor. I'm very disappointed in those folks in the legislature that want to put a stop to this. And I was not in total agreement with the way the bill was passed because I didn't think it was strong enough. But we certainly need something in place. And and it is in place, but if we were to go forward, then we, law enforcement and other people, should be lobbying the legislature to tighten up those nooses. And I'll tell you what we tried to do. We actually tried to introduce, and we were late this time, maybe it'll get tacked onto a bill, I don't know, but we tried to introduce that if you come in with a Schedule II prescription, which is the OxyContins, that you have to leave a fingerprint with your prescription. Because what happens is, when my folks go back, any law enforcement people go back and try to make a forgery charge against someone, we end up back in front of the pharmacist after we've identified who the bad guy is, months later. And we stand there with a picture of the guy and to the pharmacist and say, do you remember this guy coming in?
How can he remember?
No, I mean, he's had hundreds, maybe thousands of people he's filled prescriptions for. So we're trying to get that fingerprint on there too, just to make it a little bit tougher to do what, these folks are doing.
Well, Sheriff, when that bill passed, the idea was, like with most legislation, reform is never over. And if you're making steps, changing the way we do things, certainly I would have hoped to have seen the bill tweaked or improved going
Absolutely.
forward. I concur with your sentiments right now as to what's going on in Tallahassee regarding the monitoring bill. You mentioned, and we'll talk briefly about it because we're running a little short on time, but burglaries, and you pointed out that a lot of them are break-ins are to go to the medicine cabinet. In general, what are we not doing as a community to protect ourselves from burglaries? Do you have a few tips for the viewers?
I'll tell you two things right up front. The majority of our car burglaries they're unlocked.
Lock your doors.
Oh yeah, it's that simple. And even some of the residences where I read those burglaries, unlock windows, unlock sliding glass door, unlock front door. We don't live in the Manatee County we did 20 years ago, and you actually have to lock things up. But it's gotten to the point where not only do we tell our folks, our deputies and our crime scene people, when you go to a residential burglary, you have to fingerprint the medicine cabinet, you have to fingerprint the refrigerator, and you have to fingerprint
the refrigerator.
Yeah, and you have to fingerprint the toilet, because when the bad guys go in there, they go to the medicine cabinet first, the jewelry second. They look in your refrigerator to see if there's any food or drink that they can take with them or drink and eat there, and then they go and they use your toilet.
So this idea that we have in our mind of the burglar in black who sneaks into the bedroom and finds the jewelry box, it sounds to me like you have people walking in, using your house like it was their own, and then taking what valuables they can when they leave.
They actually spend time in there. They do spend time. It's not getting in and getting out, unless, of course, you have an alarm. And if your alarm goes off, most of them know that they've got a few minutes before law enforcement gets there.
You and I had a chance to talk a few weeks back at a club meeting, and I brought up that Sheriff Wells had talked about a lot of homes that are burglarized have alarms, but they're not on. Is that still the case?
Still the case. And they have safes, but they don't lock them. So, you've got jewelry that's in the safe, but the safe's not locked. And then you've got the house that's got the alarm, but it's not on, and people are breaking in and stealing the valuables. Yeah, we have to do a better job of securing ourselves, unfortunately, these days. So.
Well, you're doing a great job of protecting us, and it sounds like we could all be a little more responsible as a community. Sheriff, I want to thank you for taking some time to chat with me today and talk about some of the legislation and other issues facing our community. Really look forward to being with you again soon, and again, thank you for your service.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.